What do? We're business. We're American business. What do? We adapt and overcome. Any Marines out here? You've heard that once or twice, right?
Me.
All right. Listen, the biggest cost in business in 33 years of practice, the biggest cost in business that I've seen across every single industry is the cost of uncertainty. If you don't know what's about to hit you, 9 times out of 10, the thing that hits you that you didn't know about is the existential cost that is going to blow you up. All right? This is good. You started already by listening here to know you have an issue out there. All right? How do we address that uncertainty? Here's what we do as business people, non-emotional business people. We weigh the cost of compliance versus the potential exposure. All right? And each one of these, like I said earlier, is a case-by-case basis. You have to know your specific potential exposure and your potential costs to get into compliance, weigh them as against your risk personality, your risk profile, of course. But the only way to know this, really, well, like I said, I gave you the code section. You can look at it and make your own judgment. I don't recommend it, but you can. I highly recommend either a legal review or an HR specialist review. And I will give you the benefit of my rule of thumb with respect to exposure based upon all the cases I've seen. All right? And by the way, there were independent contractor cases way before this law. Okay? So based upon the cases I've seen, the rule of thumb is this. Whatever you've paid out to an independent contractor over the year, your bill will be somewhere around 50 to 60% of that. All right? So give you an example. And by the way, if they audit you 4 years back, it's 4 years of that. So to give you an example, if you pay $100,000 a year to independent contractors and they catch you for 4 years going back, or 6 years, or if they think it's fraud, they can go back forever, but whatever. They catch you 3, 4 years down the road, that's $400,000 you pay to independent contractors. That means you'll be getting a bill for about $240, plus your legal fees, plus your accountants. That puts businesses out of business. And frankly, they don't care. Yep. They don't care at all if you go out of business. All right? So know your exposure, and then make a business decision. Once you get your audit and your review, a couple of things can happen. Let's say you have 1099 qualified contractors. Well, just because they're qualified doesn't mean that you've satisfied the law. You have to have, whether you meet the ABC test or some exception, you have to have that written agreement. And I will tell you, because of the new law, the written agreements have to be different. Okay? They can't be the same that they used to be. We used to use one independent contractor agreement format for all our independent contractors because the indicia are all the same, right? We don't do that anymore. We can't do that anymore. You have to have separate agreements for each separate qualification because you have to call out all of the aspects, all of the elements of that qualification. You still have to satisfy the Borello standards, so of course you're going to start with that old agreement that you had before. You're just going to be adding the Dynamet standard into it. It must be specific as to whether you are qualifying under an ABC test or you're qualifying under an exception or both. If you're qualifying under both, you make it clear that you're qualifying under both so you have a safe harbor in case something doesn't work. All right? Here's the important things that I've added to my independent contractor agreements that qualify. All right? I got contractor reps and warranties as to each one of those 5, 6, 8, or 12 different indicia that they are making a representation and warranty to my client, the hiring party, that they satisfy that. All right? I add exhibits to the document now to prove those reps and warranties. To give you an example, if I say, if one of the reps and warranties is that I have a business and I offer these services to other people, I'll attach a copy of their website page, their web page. I'll attach a copy of their business card. I'll attach a copy of their standard agreement form that they have. I'll do all of that and gather all of that evidence for every one of the indicia that I can. And why? Because 4 years later, when you get your audit and that independent contractor is a surf instructor in Bora Bora, you have your evidence. All right? There's one other thing that's not, there's one other thing that I always put at the bottom of the list. I always ask for it, and that is an indemnity from the contractor. They indemnify my clients, the hiring party, in case they get an adverse ruling of an improper classification. Listen, I don't think for a second that an independent contractor that gets paid a couple $1,000s a year by me is going to step up and pay me money when I call the indemnity, all right? But what I do use it as is a little bit of a hammer on the independent contractor. So that independent contractor will give me his or her tax information and financial information so I could prove to the EDD that they in fact paid their taxes on that money, that they in fact did their SDI on that money, that I could show the federal government that they paid Social Security payments on that money, and at the very least, I could reduce the bill that goes to my client. Been through this once or twice. The last thing that I would have with that indemnity, on a highly paid independent contractor, I get that indemnity insured. Give you an example. I just had a situation where I put new independent contractor agreement together for a client of mine that uses a contractor sub, a real estate contractor sub, construction contractor sub. That is a specific exception in there. However, I also got the indemnity, and I got the indemnity insured because my client, he's a construction supervisor outside, and he earns $400,000 to $500,000 a year. At $400,000 to $500,000 a year, he can afford an insurance policy. All right, what happens if you don't have qualified 1099 contractors? There's lots of things we can do. We don't have to throw our hands up in the air and bring them all in as employees. We don't have to run out of California saying nobody could do business in California. Someone's going to take your place if you do, all right? That's just how it works. But what we can do is restructure the independent contractor relationships so they do qualify. We can help your independent contractors restructure themselves to qualify. If you can't do that, there's also always a staffing agency option. Okay, you could fill up your needs with a staffing agency. Understand it has all sorts of separate other issues. You'll be a co-employer, but it's still better than having the employees and satisfying all of the requirements of the labor code that you have to do to have an employee. We can restructure the company's operational business plan. I've done that for a client just recently. I have a client who is a very big, very well-known party planner. And she does party planning throughout the Western United States. And so, of course, when she goes into a separate place or an area where she's not established, if you will, physically, she has to hire servers, she has to hire music, she has to hire caterers, she has to hire decorators, all sorts of things. A few events in that area, so 2 weeks later, all of those people are fired if she gets them in as employees. Guess what? They're making unemployment claims. She can't deal with that. All right? So what we did was we structured her company so when she makes her bids are in such a manner that the client is actually hiring those professionals directly through her contract on a bid. Okay? So she's not hiring them. There's always a way. There is always a way for business to make it through when you have a changing circumstance. You just have to be fanatical about it. When I say fanatical about it, I mean fanatical about your business. Okay? Last thing is, if we absolutely have to, we onboard employees. But that is the last choice because of that first slide you saw.